Hi, thanks for coming to story time today here with Newport Public Library. And I thought that today the story that I'd share with you is an old favorite of mine. It comes from Japan, and you can find it at your library in collections. The one that I use is the one that was put out by Margaret Reed MacDonald some years ago, called 20 Tellable Tales. And this is the story of a roly-poly rice ball. Now, for those of you who have never seen a rice ball, it's cooked rice that's put firmly together and then kept that way. And so that you can tuck it into a lunch bag or a pocket, if you will, and have a lunch to go. The roly-poly rice ball. There once was in old Japan a kind old man and a kind old woman who lived in a little tiny house surrounded by a large garden. Now the kind old man and the kind old woman, they were quite poor. They were farmers and didn't have much money, but they were rich in love and kindness to people. And even if they didn't have very much, they shared what they had with their friends, with their neighbors, with strangers passing along the road. And every morning, the kind old woman would carefully cook rice and then make 3 perfect rice balls. And these she would put into a clean and ironed furoshiki. Oh, a furoshiki is a handkerchief. And she would tie it up and she would give it to her husband, who would say, "Oh, thank you, kind old woman." And he would tuck it into his jacket and off he would go to his rice paddies to take care of the rice. And one morning, as he was walking down the road, he heard these little voices, high little voices, and he couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Until his eye happened to see a hole alongside the road. And when he bent down close, he heard these little voices, and they were saying, "Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in. Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in." "Oh," laughed the kind old man. "They want one of my rice balls. Oh, I can share." And so he unwrapped his furoshiki and took out one of the rice balls and he tossed it, koro, 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 plop, and it went into the hole. And then he listened, and those little voices, "Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in. Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in." Oh, they want another one. I'll share. And so the kind old man took his second rice ball and he tossed it, koro, 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 plop, into the hole. And he listened. Oh, and the voices wanted another one. "Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in. Roly-poly rice ball, roll right in." Oh, so the kind old man took his last rice ball, all he had for lunch, and he tossed it, koro, 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 plop, into the hole. And then he leaned down and listened, and you know what the voices said? They said, "Roly-poly furoshiki, roll right in. Roly-poly furoshiki, roll right in." Oh, so the old man crumpled up his furoshiki and he tossed it, koro, 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 plop, into the hole. And then he listened, and you know what those voices were saying now? They were singing, "Roly-poly old man, roll right in. Roly-poly old man, roll right in." So the kind old man, he jumped into the hole, koro, 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 plop. And when he landed, he was under the world. And all around him were little tiny mice people. Some of them were singing, and some of them were grinding rice, and they were doing all sorts of work and play in a huge hall under the earth. And one of the mice people came up to him and said, "Oh, kind old man, thank you so much for your rice balls. Please, you must come and share our food with us." And the mouse person, he led the kind old man over to a table. And then he pulled out a teeny tiny golden hammer and he shook it 1, 2, 3 times. And the table was covered with the most wondrous food. There were fishes fresh from the sea. There were peaches this big on the table. And the kind old man said, "Oh, this is such a feast. I only wish my wife, who is such a kind old woman, could share it with me." "Oh, she can, old man, she can," said the mouse person. And he took out another tiny magic golden hammer and he handed it to the kind old man. And he said, Be sure and tell your wife to shake it just 3 times." and your table will always be full of wonderful food. Thank you, thank you, said the kind old man, and he tucked the tiny magic golden hammer in his jacket, and he shared the feast with the mice people. And when he left, they all bid him farewell, and that he must come back again soon. The kind old man climbed out of the hole, and he got on the road, and he walked home. And his wife met him at the door, asking him what kind of day he had. He says, "Oh, the best kind, my wife, the best kind. Look what I have." And he handed her the tiny magic golden hammer. And when she took it, he said, "Now, just shake it 3 times, no more." And so she did. 1, 2, 3. Oh! And their little table was covered with the most wonderful foods they could ever imagine. And there was so much of it that they went and invited their friends and neighbors to come and share it. Now, one of their neighbors was a man and a woman who were as mean and as stingy as the kind old man and his wife were kind and generous. And they came to the feast that the kind old man and his wife put on. And they ate as much as they could, and they stuffed food in all of their pockets. And when they went home that night, the mean old woman said to her husband, "Well, husband, I want one of those magic golden hammers. You need to go get one for me." "Fine, wife," he said, "but you will have to fix me some rice balls." So the next morning, the mean old woman, she scraped up some rice that had dropped on the floor and smashed it together and put it into a dirty, used furoshiki and said, here you go. Now go get me one of those magic golden hammers." So the mean old man, he went out and down the road, and he was looking and looking and looking and listening for those little voices that the kind old man had spoken of. He didn't hear the voices, but he did finally find a hole alongside the road. He thought that was it. So he took out his crummy rice balls, and he tossed one plop, into the hole. But he heard nothing. So he took another one. Plop. Nothing. He took the last one and tossed it plop, into the hole. Nothing. In went the furoshiki. Plop. Still nothing. Finally, the mean old man just jumped in himself. Plop. And when he landed, for some reason or another, none of the mice people saw him, and so he quickly moved behind a rock pillar, and he looked around the great hall at all of the mice people singing and dancing and grinding rice for flour. And finally, he saw a table, and on that table there lay one of those tiny magic golden hammers that his wife wanted. But how was he to get it for her? It was surrounded by mice people. Of course, the mean old man went, "Meow! I can't run! And all the little mice people disappeared into the tunnels that went off that cave. And the mean old man went over and he grabbed that tiny magic golden hammer, stuck it in his coat, climbed out of mouse country, and home he went. And when he got there, "Here, wife, here's your magic golden hammer you wanted so badly." "Good," she said, and she grabbed it and she went, "Shake, shake, 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 shake," in the belief that the more she shook, the more she'd have. And indeed, their table suddenly filled up with rotten mushrooms and huge spiders and smelly, awful things they couldn't even identify. The kind old woman and the kind old man, they continued to live in their little house, but every day they would make a feast for all their friends, neighbors, and strangers passing along the road. And the kind old man and the kind old woman, they lived a very long and a very happy life.